Okay, thank you, Stephanie, for doing all of the administrative work to set this up. And I am delighted to welcome Professor Xiaoxing Shi to give us a talk today. This is a very timely and powerful message that he's going to deliver to us today in light of recent events. But let me start by introducing him as a physicist. Professor Xiaoxing Shi is the Laura H. Carnell Professor of Physics at Temple University and former chair of that department. He received his bachelor's and his PhD in physics from Peking University, and then he worked for several years at the Karlsruhe Nuclear Research Center in Germany, Bell Communication Research, Rutgers University, and University of Maryland before he joined the physics faculty at Penn State in 1995. His research focuses on materials physics of oxide, boride, and two-dimensional chalcogenide thin films. And his notable contributions include early work on epitaxial thin films, heterostructures, electric field effect and high temperature superconductors, and lattice dynamics in ferroelectric thin films and nanostructures. He has invented hybrid physical chemical vapor deposition for magnesium diboride and developed ALD molecular beam epitaxy for oxide thin films and interfaces. He is the author of over 340 refereed journals and 3 US patents in the area of thin films and high TC superconductors, and he is a fellow of the American Physical Society. In addition to all of these tremendous accolades as a physicist, he has since 2015 devoted a great deal of his energy to speaking out for open collaboration in fundamental research and against racial profiling that gets in the way of open scientific collaboration. And for this work, this humanitarian work, speaking out for openness of scientific inquiry and collaboration, he received in 2020 the Andrei Sakharov Prize from the American Physical Society, which is given to somebody who is an excellent leader in humanitarian work. So I'm delighted to welcome Professor Xiaoxing Shi today, and I think that he's going to give us a really powerful talk. Thank you so much for being here and speaking to us. You're muted, Xiaoxing, and are you able to screen share? Okay, we see your screen, but you're still muted. Stephanie, I believe you're the host. Can you unmute Professor Shi?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, great.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny, for the kind introduction and for inviting me here for the virtual visit today. I really enjoy the meetings with the faculty members and look forward to meeting the graduate students after the talk. Now, I'm honored to be your first Colloquium speaker of the year. We live in this extraordinary time, and it's appropriate to start the new semester by talking about a serious subject, scientific espionage, open exchange, and American competitiveness. I start my talk with the news that shook the scientific world.
Federal investigators at the Lexington home of 60-year-old Dr. Charles Lieber today, moments after his arrest at his Harvard office.
The complaint alleges that Dr. Lieber signed a contract with the Chinese university in Wuhan and was paid up to $50,000 per month, plus up to $158,000 in living expenses.
The chair of Harvard's chemistry department, he also allegedly received more than $1.5 million to set up a research lab in China, all while working at Harvard and receiving multiple research grants from the U.S. Department of Defense and National Institutes of Health.
On February 19, 2020, I was interviewed on the NPR's Boston station.
When I heard the case of Charles Lieber, I wanted to tell people, one, Charles Lieber is presumed innocent until proven guilty. Two, from my own personal experience, what the government charges is not necessarily true.
1 year later, the scientific community was shocked again by another news story from Cambridge.
An MIT professor facing federal charges for allegedly failing to disclose his ties to the Chinese government. We're talking about Gang Chen. Here's a photo of him. He faces a number of charges, including wire fraud and making false statements to a government agency. The complaint alleges that Chen has held contacts with China since 2012, all while receiving $29 million of foreign funding for his research. Chen is accused of applying for a Department of Energy grant to support that research without disclosing his ties to China.
I want to say again that one, Gang Chen is presumed innocent until proven guilty. And two, from my own personal experience, what the government charges is not necessarily true. I say this because I was the subject of a similar news story on May 21st, 2015.
The United States Justice Department is saying that the chairman of the Temple University Department of Physics is an international spy, passing off technology secrets to China. Live on the Temple campus tonight is Action News reporter Wendy Sultan. Wendy?
Jim, Professor Xiaoxing was the head of physics here at Temple University, specializing in superconductors. But this federal indictment alleges that he used Defense Department funds in order to build technology that he later leaked to leaders in his homeland. Chinese native Xiaoxing has worked at Temple since 2009. This world-renowned physicist now faces 4 counts of wire fraud for allegedly sharing thin-film superconductor technology with the Chinese government. According to the indictment, Xi turned over sensitive technology and offered to help Chinese entities become world leaders in the field, and also recruited his postdoctoral students from China to assist in the scheme. Xi built these superconductors using a Defense Department grant. They would allow those who possess the technology to build the fastest electronic devices in the world, and they could be used in anti-military defense systems, among other applications. In return for the information, Xi allegedly sought lucrative and prestigious appointments in China. He faces a maximum sentence of 80 years in prison if convicted.
It was my personal experience to be woken up by loud knocks on my door and to find FBI agents outside my house who put handcuffs on me on the spot. It was my personal experience to watch armed agents in bulletproof vests bursting into my house, shouting FBI, FBI, and running up my wife and 2 daughters at gunpoint. My younger daughter was only 12 years old at the time. It was my personal experience to be taken away from my house without knowing why I was arrested and when I will see my family again. All for something I never did. The sensitive technology I was charged with stealing was a device called pocket heater. The indictment against me said that a US company, STI, invented the pocket heater that revolutionized the field of superconducting magnesium diboride thin film growth, and I stole it for Chinese government entities in an effort to help them become world leaders in the field of superconductivity. The charges were totally false. I had never shared STI pocket heater information with anyone in China. Further, I don't understand why the government even cared about this pocket heater. It is not classified, not sensitive, not a trade secret, and not export controlled, and it had little commercial value. It was invented in 1993 by a German professor for high-TC superconductor films. It looks like a Danish cookie can with an opening on its cover. The inside of the pocket is filled with oxygen, and the spinning platen rotates the substrate on it from the opening where metals are deposited to the inside to be oxidized. In the community, it is widely known as the Kinder heater after the professor's name. In 2003, STI modified the Kinder heater for magnesium diboride. Instead of oxygen, it fills the pocket with magnesium vapor. It creates magnesium diboride films with poorer quality than the technique my group at Penn State had already developed. The government charged me for scheming to steal this publicly available technology, which is inferior to my own technique, which somehow would make the Chinese world leaders in superconductivity. The charges were not only false, they were laughable. There were 4 counts against me based on 4 emails I sent to Chinese colleagues from my Temple University email address. Count 1 confirms that certain technology has been delivered to a laboratory in China, but a certain technology had nothing to do with the pocket heater. Here is the actual email, which was clearly about superconducting RF cavities for a collaboration with colleagues at Shanghai Institute of Applied Physics, the SINAP. The system was built by my collaborators at SINAP using a tube heater to coat the inside wall of SRF cavity, which is a three-dimensional object. You cannot do this with the SCI pocket heater, which is for flat films. It was based on the HPCVD technique my group at Penn State had developed, and experience from this collaboration helped my later research at Temple University, resulting in numerous publications. Counts 2 to 4 charged me for offering to build a world-class thin film laboratory in China. They were not even about magnesium diboride. They were about oxide thin films. Being innocent does not automatically mean that I will be exonerated. I was fortunate to have found a team of great lawyers for my defense. It consisted of a lead counsel from Washington, D.C., who was the leader of the team, a local counsel from Philadelphia, who was familiar with the local court, and an IP attorney who can communicate effectively between scientists and the lawyers. My lawyer contacted top experts in my research field and a co-inventor of the pocket heater, War Ruby, and gave them all my email communications with Chinese colleagues. Ruby said, "I'm very familiar with the pocket heater as I was one of the co-inventors." After examining these emails, they all concluded in their affidavits that I did not share the pocket heater technology with China in these emails. Armed with these affidavits, my lawyer gave a 48 slides presentation to the government on the science of the case, and I'm showing you a couple of slides here. They told the prosecutors and FBI agents that the tube heater I discussed with colleagues at SINAP, shown on the left, is unrelated to the STI pocket heater, shown on the right. They don't even look similar. They have different principles, different designs, and different usages from each other. They told the government that magnesium diboride is not an oxide. An oxide contains oxygen atoms in its chemical formula, and there is no oxygen atom in magnesium diboride. Oxides need oxygen in the thin film growth, while we want to avoid any oxygen in the deposition of magnesium diboride. At the end, my lawyers made a request to the government. Find your own expert, give them all my communications with Chinese colleagues, and ask, is there any evidence that Professor Xi shared any pictures, drawings, or schematics of the STI MGB2 pocket heater? We also shared with the government a draft motion to dismiss the indictment, which we were ready to file with the court. It said the government entire prosecution is based on the presentation of false and misleading testimony to the grand jury, premised on the faulty understanding of basic and non-controversial scientific principles and the concepts by an FBI agent who was not qualified to be the government's sole witness before the grand jury. On September 11, 2015, the government dismissed the case, citing additional information came to the attention of the government. On September 17th, I went to my lab for the first time in 4 months. My group welcomed me back with a bouquet of flowers, and we were so glad to see each other again. However, my life and my career would never be the same. Since then, I have been telling anybody who would care to listen about the lessons that I have learned from this horrific experience. Lesson number 1 is what I have told you at the beginning of this talk. When you see a DOJ news release like this, charging someone for stealing secrets for China, remember, it is not necessarily true. In my case, what they said was totally false. Here is another good example. This DOJ news release said that University of Kansas chemistry professor Franklin Tao unlawfully received federal grant money at the same time that he was employed by a Chinese research university, a fact he hid from his university and the federal agencies. You can actually go to the PACER website at pacer.gov to read all the federal court documents. Here is what I have learned about Franklin Tao's case. On August 21st, 2019, the government indicted Tao for having signed a full-time employment contract with Fuzhou University, but did not disclose it to University of Kansas on the conflict of interest forms. On November 17th, 2019, Tao filed a motion to dismiss the indictment, saying that he never signed any contract, thus had nothing to disclose. Then on January 15th, 2020, the government hit Tao with a superseding indictment. It did not say Tao signed the contract anymore, but charged him for failing to disclose his selection by the talents program, even though he has never accepted the offer. On June 24th, 2020, the government modified its theory again in the second superseding indictment. They said Tao entered into a contract, started his employment, and fulfilled his contractual obligations. How could they say this, knowing Tao signed no contract? They said because Tao traveled to China and engaged in research activities at Fuzhou University. On August 14th, 2020, Tao filed a motion to dismiss the second superseding indictment, saying University of Kansas's conflict of interest form did not require disclosure of his relationships with Fuzhou University. Further, the government lied to the grand jury. For example, they knew Tao bought out teaching for spring 19, but told the grand jury that Tao's request was not successful. On September 11th, 2020, the government responded to Tao's motion, repeating the allegations that Tao obtained employment at Fuzhou University, entered into an agreement with the Chinese government, and received a handsome annual salary from Fuzhou University, knowing full well that Tao accepted no offer. On August 20, 2020, several Asian American civil rights organizations filed an amicus brief with the court on behalf of Tao, saying that the government is targeting Chinese American scientists and the researchers based on their ancestry rather than suspected criminal activity. And then the racially biased persecutions are causing immense harm to the Chinese and the Asian American and immigrant communities. This leads to lesson number 2. Innocent Chinese American scientists are being unfairly targeted. People ask me, what triggered the FBI to target me? To this day, I don't know. What I do know is that there is a pattern for innocent Chinese scientists to be charged, only for the charges to be dropped, or the case collapsed. Before my case, there was National Weather Service hydrologist Sherry Chen and Eli Lilly biologist Guo Yucao and Shuyu Li. After my case, there was Michigan State Professor Ning Xi, Tulane Professor Ahab Mesohi and Ke Lin Hu, scientist Xin Zhao, and visiting scientist at the University of Virginia, Haizhou Hu. It is extremely rare for the government to drop cases, yet there are so many drop cases involving Chinese scientists. In World War II, when the United States was at war with Japan, the US government locked up over 100,000 Japanese in internment camps, many of them American citizens. They were suspected of signaling to Japanese aircrafts using flashlights. Today, as the tension between the US and China is rising rapidly, Chinese students, scientists, and professors are suspected of stealing intellectual properties for China. In 2018, the Department of Justice established a China initiative to prioritize economic espionage cases related to China. According to Professor Maggie Lewis of Seton Hall University, naming a law enforcement initiative after country is unprecedented, and it attached a criminal taint to entities that have an even tangential nexus to China. But if you look at the DOJ's own website on the China initiative cases, you'll find that as of November 12, 2020, there have been 9 cases against university professors, 7 of whom are ethnically Chinese. None of the cases, 0, alleges theft of intellectual properties, and all are about not disclosing China ties. The crime charge include false statements or false claims for non-disclosure, wire fraud when you use emails, grant fraud when you have federal grants, and a false tax return. You may argue that failure to disclose China ties is wrong, but that is not the question here. For example, Sandra Bland, an African-American woman, was stopped by a Texas state trooper for not signaling a turn. Was it something improper? Yes, it was. But nobody should have gone to jail and died for it. The same can be said in the case of Samuel Dubose for a missing front license plate, and Philando Castile for a broken taillight. They likely would not have died for these offenses had they not been African Americans. Similarly, the right question we should ask is whether it is okay to single out the entire group of Chinese professors, scientists, and students for targeting as suspected non-traditional collectors or spies for China. That is racial profiling, and that is wrong. The third lesson I learned from my experience is that the DOJ is criminalizing academic collaborations with China. It was clear to me during my interrogation by the FBI agents that they knew nothing about how science is done, and they saw routine academic activities as criminal. According to the US attorney who is prosecuting Charles Lieber and Gang Chen, academic collaboration with China is by definition conveying sensitive information to the Chinese. You don't even have to be a Chinese. Anyone who has academic collaboration with Chinese colleagues can become a target of the FBI. Once you are a target, your email will be read, your phone will be tapped, and everything you have ever done in your life will be under the microscope. And the China Initiative makes sure that the FBI has enough resources to do it. I was charged as a result of such an examination, basically for doing what the government and the university encouraged me to do, that is scientific collaborations with Chinese colleagues. Having realized that openness in fundamental research and international collaborations were under serious threat, and the scientific community needed to have a voice on such an important issue, I went to the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine in May 2016 and gave a presentation to their Committee on Human Rights. I called upon the academies to conduct a study on the benefits and the risk of international collaborations and to recommend guidelines for the government and the scientific community in conducting such collaborations. I'm glad to say that we now have such a study. In 2019, the National Science Foundation commissioned a study from the Jason Group on fundamental research security, and the group submitted its report in December 2019. Jason is an independent group of elite scientists which advises the US government on science and technology matters, mostly of a sensitive nature. All its members have security clearances and access to classified information. The Jason group does not publicize who is a Jason, which is how the members call themselves. But we know they can speak on behalf of the scientific community to the US government. The Jason report adequately addressed the threat to fundamental research by foreign influence and gave us a powerful weapon to debunk many falsehoods that has been propagated by some politicians and the law enforcement officials. And that is what I will focus on in the remainder of this talk. Falsehood number one, Chinese scientists, academics, and students are non-traditional collectors for China.
There are a slew of what we call non-traditional collectors, businessmen, scientists, high-level academics, graduate students, et cetera, people who are not intelligence officers by profession, but who are, for a variety of reasons, working on behalf of the Chinese government.
In other words, they are Chinese spies. Former Secretary of State explained it in a very stark term.
We know, too, that not all Chinese students and employees are just normal students and workers that are coming here to make a little bit of money and to garner themselves some knowledge. Too many of them come here to steal our intellectual property and to take this back to their country. Communist China is already within our borders.
Chinese students and employees are not normal students and workers. communist China is already within our borders. Joseph McCarthy said the same in the 1950s. Communists hold US jobs. During the McCarthy era, many innocent Americans lost jobs, saw their career destroyed, and some were imprisoned. Let's hear Joseph McCarthy speak.
One communist on the faculty of one university is one communist too many. Even if there are only one communist in the State Department, that would still be one communist too many.
One communist on the faculty of one university is one communist too many. Even if there is only one communist in the State Department, there will still be one communist too many. These words resonate with what we are hearing today. The question is, are Chinese professors, scientists, and students spies for China? The Jason report answered unequivocally no. It said that Chinese scholars, either Chinese citizens or US citizens originally from China, are typically not acting as representatives of the Chinese Communist Party or the Chinese government, and are not necessarily in agreement with the aims, methods, or policies of these institutions. They must be treated as fellow residents or citizens of our country and should be judged on their personal actions and not by profiling based on the actions of the government and the political institutions of China. All of us should speak up on behalf of our Chinese colleagues so they will not be subject to the new McCarthyism. No matter what America's China policy is, whether the two countries are in a Cold War or hot war, it is wrong for the law enforcement to profile Chinese students, scientists, and professors based on where they come from. Falsehood number 2, Chinese students steal American intellectual property back to China.
It's a scandal to me that we have trained so many of the Chinese Communist Party's brightest minds to go back to China to compete for our jobs, to take our business, and ultimately to steal our property and design weapons and other devices that can be used against the American people. So I think we need to take a very hard look at the visas that we give to Chinese nationals to come to the United States to study, especially at the postgraduate level in advanced scientific and technological fields. You know, if Chinese students want to come here and study Shakespeare and the Federalist Papers, that's what they need to learn from America. They don't need to learn quantum computing and artificial intelligence from America.
We hear it repeated by former Secretary of State.
The Chinese Communist Party knows it can never match our innovation. It has state-owned enterprise. It's an authoritarian regime. It is a government-centric focus. It's why it sends 400,000 students a year to the United States of America to study. 400,000 students a year studying in our universities come from one country. It is no accident. Much of the high-end industrial base inside of China is based on stolen technology or technology purchased from other nations. It's not homegrown.
Chinese Communist Party sends 400,000 students a year to the United States to steal technology for China. Nothing can be further from the truth. First of all, the majority of the Chinese students in the US are not funded by the Chinese government. Second, under the supervision of their advisors, graduate students are the people who actually create discovery and innovations in America. Then after the students from China got their PhD degrees, according to this study, an overwhelming majority, 90%, stayed in the US, contributing to American economic and national security. Many became American citizens. The Jason report said that foreign students are critical to our domestic research enterprise, and some universities' graduate programs likely could not maintain their high level of excellence without them. Many Chinese students stayed in the US, adding to our expert workforce. There are many ways to measure the contributions students from China make to America. Here I show members of National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine who were students from China and now leaders in academia and business in the United States. Many of them are your alumni or employees here at Harvard. Along with immigrants from all over the world, students from China help to make America stronger, more prosperous, and more secure. Falsehood number 3. Academic collaborations allow China to leapfrog American research, helping China to take advantage of the taxpayers' funding.
The research they're taking over to China isn't just going toward academic purposes. That wouldn't be right either, because our taxpayer dollars are going in to fund this research. They're then leapfrogging us by getting that research.
In other words, academic collaborations with China are bad for America. That is not true. Many US funding agencies run collaborative research programs with China. In this 2012 report to the Congress, the Department of State said that US-China science and technology cooperation accelerated scientific progress in the United States, providing significant direct benefit to a range of US technical agencies. NSF established the PIRE program in 2005, jointly funding research projects with funding agencies of many countries, including China's Ministry of Science and Technology, because international engagement is critical to keeping the US globally competitive at the frontier of knowledge. The former head of the NSF Beijing office said, US scientists can access world-class facilities, unique geographic sites, and expertise in a growing number of fields by collaborating with Chinese colleagues. She added that NSF funding can be leveraged in coordinated partnerships with China. In other words, scientific collaborations with China enhances the impact of taxpayer money, leading to more science and engineering breakthroughs. NIH ran a US-China program for biomedical collaborative research since 2006 to stimulate collaborations with China. In 2014, the NIH director told an audience at Fudan University in Shanghai, quoting Louis Pasteur, that science knows no country because knowledge belongs to humanity. Falsehood number 4, US colleges and universities turn blind eyes to Chinese espionage.
Our nation's colleges and universities are so addicted to the tuition money and research grants that pour in from Chinese students and destructive spy programs like 1,000 Talents and Confucius Institutes that they turn two blind eyes to the espionage that regularly occurs on their campuses.
In this FBI documents published in 2019, the FBI warned US universities that the Chinese government targets Chinese professors, students, and scientists on their campuses to entice them to steal secrets for China. In an APS News backpage commentary, the APS leadership pointed out that FBI documents does not provide cases of threats relating to unclassified basic research in academia. The fact is that most of us professors do not do secret or sensitive research. What we do is the so-called fundamental research. Because the principles of freedom to publish and disseminate is so essential to US universities that most of them do not accept funding that restrict its faculty from publishing and disseminating their results. Here at Harvard, the openness in research policy says, Harvard University is committed to preserving and protecting the freedom of research and maintaining a teaching and research environment that is open and that promotes the free exchange of research results. It will not undertake classified research, and we will not accept publication restrictions. And the foreign faculty, students, and scholars will not be singled out for restriction in access to Harvard University's education and research facilities and activities. The Jason report described the National Security Decision Directive 189 issued by President Reagan in 1985, which established a national policy for controlling the flow of science, technology, engineering information produced in federally funded research. NSDEN 189 established a clear distinction between fundamental research and classified research. It has been reaffirmed by the Bush administration and the Obama administration and still operative as our national policy today. NSDEN 189 defined fundamental research as basic and applied research in science and engineering, the result of which ordinarily are published and shared broadly within the scientific community. It said, it is the policy of this administration that to the maximum extent possible, the products of fundamental research remain unrestricted. If national security requires control, then the research should be classified. In terms of basic research and applied research, there are clear definitions in federal policies and regulations. For example, basic research is systematic study directly towards greater knowledge or understanding of the fundamental aspects of phenomena and or observable facts without specific applications towards processes or products in mind. For those who receive funding from the Department of Defense, this is the so-called 6-1 research. The NIH director said it best about the fundamental research in this interview.
Let me ask you a couple of questions on the vaccine. First of all, this hacking issue that apparently the Russians were behind, was NIH targeted, and did you guys lose any key information?
And certainly we are always under cyber attacks of various sorts. But I would say most of what we do in science, we publish it. We put it out there. People don't have to go hacking to find it. We're all about transparency. So I'm not exactly sure what serious risk is involved here. Mischief, yes, but serious risk, I'm not so sure.
Most of what we do in science, we publish it. You don't have to steal it. The concept of stealing open fundamental research is totally nonsensical contradiction. Falsehood number 5, we need to control unclassified documents because they create classified documents. Listen to this defense lawyer talk about the 1,000 grains of sand theory or mosaic theory that is widely held by the intelligence community.
But there was much more. We have a saying called the mosaic theory, which is that you have 5 unclassified documents, and if you put them together, it creates a classified document. Russia wants to steal the one classified document. The Chinese would go out and try and obtain all this unclassified information and put the pieces together. That's why a lot of academics in the non-security world, or as contractors to United States agencies, especially in the national laboratories with the Department of Energy, were always under suspicion.
You have unclassified documents, you put them together, and it creates a classified document. Here, the FBI says, even if the technology and their applications are not currently classified, they could be in the future. So you can be in trouble even when you talk about fundamental science with Chinese scientists. The only safe solution seems to be not to talk at all, or a complete academic decoupling from China. On November 19, 2019, a Senate subcommittee released a staff report on threat to the US research enterprise. It recommended that the administration should consider updating NSDEN 189 and implement additional limited restrictions on US government-funded fundamental research. Federal agencies must assess whether openly sharing some types of fundamental research is in the nation's interest. So open fundamental research is facing an existential threat. I want to sign the statement on security in science by the National Science Board in October 2018 to emphasize the central importance of openness to fundamental research. It said fundamental research is built on open exchanges of ideas and information. These scientific values mirror American ideals of freedom, a combination that has helped our country lead the world in technology, driven our economy, and that in turn protects our freedom. It quoted NSDEN 189. The strength of American science requires a research environment conducive to creativity, an environment in which the free exchange of ideas is a vital component. It also quoted National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice. The key to maintaining US technological preeminence is to encourage open and collaborative basic research. The linkage between the free exchange of ideas and scientific innovation, prosperity, and the US national security is undeniable. The Jason report took a strong position on this issue. It sets NSDEN 189, which makes clear that fundamental research should remain unrestricted, is America's national policy and should be reaffirmed. No new restrictions using intermediate level boundaries should be established. Falsehood number 6, non-disclosure of China ties has to be criminally prosecuted. Here, the US attorney in Boston addressed the Lieber case.
The core of the allegation against him is that he lied about this to federal authorities, including investigators from NIH and DOD, when they asked him about it. And that is a crime. And so in light of that case, a lot of questions we've gotten revolve around, well, is it illegal for academics in the United States to collaborate with their counterparts in foreign countries? And the answer to that is no. And again, this has caused some confusion because while that is allowed, lying about that activity to federal authorities when you're required not to is not allowed.
While failure to disclose China tie is wrong, is criminal prosecution the right response to such actions? The Jason report addressed the issue of failure to disclose conflict of interest and conflict of commitment. It said that what should be reported is not always clear, and the requirements for disclosure must be clearly communicated to everyone involved. In terms of failure to disclose, the Jason report said that it should be investigated and adjudicated by funding agencies and universities, with consequences similar to those currently in place for scientific misconduct, such as demotion, dismissal, and debarment. Only willfully supply incorrect information as part of a disclosure should be treated as crime. So unless willfully deceptive, failure to disclose should not be prosecuted, in particular when the rules of disclosure were different or not clear. According to the DOJ's Justice Manual, the grounds for declining prosecution include when there exists an adequate non-criminal alternative to prosecution. The Jason report clearly concluded that there is a non-criminal alternative to the criminal prosecution for non-disclosure of China ties, which is investigation and adjudication by funding agencies and universities, with consequences similar to those for scientific misconduct. Let's hear what Professor Maggie Lewis says.
You look at statements also made by U.S. Attorney Lelling in Massachusetts, where he has said very openly, yes, the China initiative will have a chilling effect, and that's a good thing. So there seems to also be, my reading of that, at least some people involved in the China initiative have said, well, we want to have essentially over-deterrence, that we think we need to have this heavy hammer of the criminal law. And I think that goes against the ethos that is in the Justice Manual, that the Department of Justice, the rules they have long set for themselves.
The heavy hammer of criminal law goes against the DOJ rules. Let's take a look at Gang Chen's case.
As detailed in the complaint, Chen had numerous appointments and contractual relationships with the government of the People's Republic of China that were intended to advance the scientific and technological goals of that country. He served as an expert and advisor on numerous Chinese scientific boards and committees, was a member of the Chinese talent programs designed to bring foreign scientific expertise to China, and participated in identifying and recruiting foreign talent for the benefit of the Chinese government. While this itself is not illegal, he concealed these relationships and work for the PRC government from the Department of Energy when applying for at least one federal grant.
He was charged for not disclosing relationships in China in his DOE grant proposal. Well, Gang Chen's activities in China are hardly a secret. For example, one of the relationships highlighted in the indictment, the Centers for Mechanical Engineering Research and Education at MIT and SUSTech, was widely publicized. In December 2020, the US Government Accountability Office issued a report on the funding agency's disclosure policies. It finds that government-wide guidance governing the grants process does not specifically mention or define non-financial conflicts, nor does it mention disclosing foreign affiliations associations, or activities. In the absence of agency-wide COI policies and definitions on non-financial interest, researchers may not fully understand what they need to report on their grant proposals. Yet we face criminal prosecutions if we made an honest mistake in missing the disclosure requirements somewhere. And this is scary. Personally, it makes me extremely nervous when applying for federal funding. In particular, when the DOJ uses funding to determine the damage caused by your crime. The more federal funding you get, the more serious your crime is. Falsehood number 7. Universities should secure their research like the industry does.
You look at people trying to take advantage of others' technology development, what becomes the weak link here? It's academia. Because people come in and out of labs at universities, they want professors and students to come from other countries, and that's beneficial for everyone. But they don't have the same type of safeguards in place that, say, a technology company would that's invested millions or billions of dollars in this research and has an infrastructure to secure that research. Academia is much more loose in how it secures these things, and that emphasis on collaboration tends to leave them vulnerable.
People should understand that academia is not industry, is not government labs. In this book published by Aspen Strategy Group in 2019, former CIA Director John Deutsch wrote, "The risk of losing of technology to China is minor compared to the losses that will be incurred by restricting inquiry on university campuses." Why? Because America's innovation edge results not only from funding and talents, but also a competitive ecosystem. In the same book, writer and historian Walter Isaacson wrote that the triangular partnership between government, industry, and academia created an ecosystem that helped produce the technological revolution after World War II. Each partner has its unique functions, and the universities are where free, open, basic research is conducted. It precedes the preparatory and the classified research at the industrial and the government labs. If you crack down the free and the open environment in academia and turn university into industrial or government labs, you will destroy the ecosystem that make America competitive in the first place and stifle American innovation. The former Los Alamos National Laboratory director said it perfectly. You don't want to put all research behind high walls.
We have to create the secrets. We create the secrets, and to create the secrets, you need a totally different atmosphere than from locking them up. We had a system at Los Alamos of what I call short fences and high fences. Keep as much of the laboratory with short fences, and then the stuff that's really, classified, you put high fences around them. But don't put a high fence around the whole place, because eventually you won't need a fence because there'll be nothing left inside that others will want.
If you shut down open fundamental research, pretty soon you will have no secret to be stolen. I'm deeply concerned that under pressure, our universities may accept the false narratives of some officials as true.
I've been to all 56 FBI field offices, and I will tell you, I'm struck by the number of offices where universities that 3 or 4 years ago wouldn't have wanted an FBI agent anywhere near campus, to some that now have office space set aside for our people. It's recognition that the information that's being stolen is their information. So it's about protecting their research, their professors, their hard work.
If the academic community does not speak up for openness, it is a real danger that the day you can publish your fundamental research freely and discuss the result openly with colleagues may be numbered. Our universities will become something we do not recognize. I'm glad to see that university leaders and academics are speaking up. In this case, the MIT president and the faculty members publicly defend Gang Chen against government acquisitions. And we all need to do the same. To be clear, we are not denying there is foreign influence by China. With all the classified law enforcement information available to them, the Jason group did a detailed assessment of how China influences American research, which includes reward, deception, coercion, and theft. They concluded that these actions occur to some degree, but how frequently they occur is not clear. The picture of foreign influence of fundamental research is far from complete, but the threat is there. It can be addressed within the framework of research integrity, not by walling off fundamental research. The Jason report made 9 recommendations. Expand research integrity to include full disclosures of actual or potential conflicts of interest and commitment, and communicate the requirements clearly to all stakeholders. Include it in ethics education and training, in particular for foreign researchers. When the requirement to disclose is violated, the funding agencies and universities should investigate and adjudicate it with consequences similar to scientific misconduct. In my opinion, the Jason report presented an appropriate and a balanced solution to a serious problem, and the scientific community should rally around it. To summarize, I hope my talk has succeeded in dispelling some frequently heard false narratives. It is false to say that Chinese scientists, academics, students are spies for the Chinese government. The majority of them do not act as representatives of China. It is false to say that Chinese students are sent by China to the US to steal secrets for China. They create knowledge when they are students, and the majority of them remain in the US. It is false to say that US colleges and universities turn blind eyes to Chinese espionage. Most universities do fundamental research, which is open according to our national policy NSDEN 189. It is false to say that academic collaborations help China leapfrog taxpayer-funded research. The US government says that scientific collaborations with China provide significant benefits to America. It is false to say that unclassified documents should be controlled because they can create classified documents. Open fundamental research is key to US technological preeminence. It is contrary to DOJ rule to say that non-disclosure of China ties has to be criminally prosecuted. Jason report recommended a non-criminal alternative, which is to treat them as violations of research integrity, with consequences similar to scientific misconduct. It is false to say that universities should secure their research like industry. Universities are not industry, and cracking down on openness in academia destroys American innovation ecosystem. In the name of securing taxpayer-funded research, the policies that deprive US universities of Chinese students persecute leading researchers who collaborate with Chinese colleagues, make it untenable for Chinese scientists to have a life and a career in the US, pursue complete academic decoupling with China, and restrict open fundamental research on university campuses are in fact destroying American science and technology. I urge everyone to rally around the Jason report, which represents the voices of the scientific community, adequately address the foreign influence of fundamental research, and should be the basis for our national policy on scientific relationship with China. There is an urgent need for all of us to speak up, to defend Chinese colleagues against injustice, to safeguard open fundamental research on university campuses, and to protect America's research enterprise from irreparable damages. If I can convince you to join this effort, then the ordeal my family and I had gone through would not be in vain. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Shi, for such a moving talk and powerful message for all of us. We have muted everybody just to, I thought we had muted everybody. Oh, Okay, so the intention was to mute everybody, I'm sorry, and to take questions in the chat. So just so that we don't get overwhelmed here. So how about if people have questions for Professor Shi, please start typing in the chat and I will read them out loud as I see them. I will also save the chat. And so if we run out of time with too many questions, he will have a record of the questions that were asked and we can try to figure out what to do to follow up on those. So I'm looking in the chat right now for questions. But while people are thinking about what to write in the chat, I'm going to actually ask a question of my own. And that is, you know, I'm just blown away by the power of your message. And also as an American myself, you know, I like being an American, I like living here. And one of the things that I'm most proud of, or have been most proud of my country, is that we have welcomed the best and the brightest immigrants from all over the world. And I think that that's what makes us great. And it really scares me in this environment that we would be pushing away what I see as the greatest strength of our country. So what message would you have to prospective immigrants about, you know, your thoughts on immigrating to the US? Is there anything that you can say that would still encourage people to come?
Well, yes, and I think the strength of America is the democracy, and every one of us has the right to have our voice be heard, and you know, that's what I'm doing here, and that's what everybody should do. And when we see something which hurts our country, we should speak up and to you know, have it changed. And that's, you know, the fact that we have the right to do this is what this country is so great about. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, come to this country and then speak up to protect your own right and to try to correct policies that hurt our country.
Thank you. I see a question. Does life and research ever go back to normal after being hunted by the FBI?
No, obviously no. As I said, I'm simply scared when I apply for funding because, you know, having experienced what I have, I know what they are capable of doing. And so everything that I say, you know, every email I send, not just me, every member of my family, they are always concerned that if something can be twisted for the government to charge us. You know, a fact that everybody should understand that your email could be read, in particular for, you know, Chinese American scientists and people collaborate with China. And so, you know, anything in the proposal, conflict of interest form, progress report, everyone, if you're missing something, it could be trouble for you. And so before I submit anything, I just look it over and over and over and think about whether I miss anything or anything that is not precise. So it has affected me in a very significant way. And my research program is much, much smaller than it used to be before, you know, I was arrested.
Thank you. The next question is, how can we be involved in supporting the Jason report?
Talk to your congressmen and senators and take every opportunities in, you know, the community organizations, or tell your friends, you know, that's the least you can do. Tell your friends about what you have just heard and tell them that there are these things which is unfair and unjust, and just spread the word. And of course, vote and to, you know, all these things to participate in the civil activities. That's the thing that we can all do. And also, what the president of MIT and the faculty of MIT have done, which is very important. And it's important that people are speaking up to protest something that they think is unjust.
Thank you. Another person asks, do you think the atmosphere will change under Biden? And how do you understand the relationship between the FBI and the White House?
I do not expect the policy will change in any significant way in the new administration. So this is not a partisan issue. This is, the justice issue, and so I think the one important point is what I said during my talk. Whatever the U.S. policy towards China is, right? Cold War or hot war or any more friendly, more hostile, whatever the policy is, it's wrong to profile scientists of Chinese ethnic origin based on their ethnicity or where they come from.
Thank you. There's a general question here. A lot of people would love to have a copy of the presentation or access to the video. And I will say that the video will be posted on the Harvard Department website in the short term. I think it has to be captioned first, so it usually takes a few days, but it will be accessible. And the chat will be saved, and we will find some way to post questions and answers if we can. The next question for Professor Xi is, the Wall Street Journal has an article, the Justice Department waives amnesty for academics to disclose foreign funding. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, amnesty implies that the person has done something wrong. And I think that's the premise, which is itself wrong. And I think the Jason report provided a perfect answer to this problem, right? So people should disclose all these China ties, and transparency is extremely important for science and scientists. And so, if you don't have everything on the table and transparent, that's not right. But Jason report concluded that should be dealt with in the framework of research integrity. And of course, in the very serious cases when people purposely hide something, that of course could be criminal. But mostly if you are just making some mistake or not clear, and like a GAO report said, this agency policies did not specify what need to be disclosed in terms of a non-financial, conflict of interest. So if you don't have clearly spelled out requirements, you cannot prosecute people for that, for not following that.
Thank you. Another question, again, persuaded by this very powerful talk, but saying that it's not uncommon among highly educated people to equate collaborating with China to stealing or engaging in shady things. So there's a high degree of suspicion. What's the best way to educate the highly educated people who aren't seeing this message yet? Now, I personally would say this was a very powerful talk, and this link will be available. So send them this link. But Professor Xi, do you have some sound bites that we can focus on?
Well, I think it's any particular part of my talk, I think each member of the audience can make their own decision. But I think it's just important to educate the public because all these falsehoods that I mentioned has been repeated so many times that people believe it. And it's up to us, the people in the scientific community, to repeat as frequently or more so that people understand what these policy doing is exactly hurting American science and technology. I think that message need to be repeated. And so that's what, in my opinion, should be done. And that's why, I talk about this in any opportunity I have, because, each time I may reach a small number of people, but this is something that I have to keep doing so that more people are aware of this.
Well, you reached at least 467 people today, and I hope more in the recording afterwards, so thank you. I see a question from an Asian American researcher who wonders whether the risk to Asian Americans who were born, raised in the US is just as great as those who immigrated like yourself.
Yes, there is a risk. And, in my situation, or in my case, I realized very much that whether you are from mainland China or from Taiwan, or you're second, third generation Chinese Americans, people can't tell. People cannot tell. And they just see us as Chinese. And, going further, anybody who collaborate with people in China are being, targeted like case of Charles Lieber. And so I don't think you can be safe from this kind of things if, you are born in this country as a second or third generation Chinese American.
Thanks. There's a lot of passion in the audience. People want to know, what can we do to help? I mean, what can we do right now? And personally, I've seen several GoFundMe's up, but I don't know, are there people we can write letters to at this moment? What is the #1 thing we can do right now to help our colleague scientists who are in trouble?
Whatever social circle you are in, tell your friends about this, and just let more and more people know of this injustice, and that I think that's basically what everybody can do, and that is actually very important. In democracy, more votes is precious to politicians, and so if they understand that a lot of their constituencies are angry about this problem and want something changed about it, and they will do something about it.
Another question from a student who is of Chinese ethnicity but born in America wonders that there's some prejudice even within the Chinese American, the non-immigrant Chinese American community against China and Chinese, thinking that COVID came from there. Do you have any suggestions for engaging with prejudice within the Chinese American community in the US?
I think one important thing for people, for students who just came out from China, is to understand that every country has its issues, and China has its issues. United States has its issues. There's no place which is kind of heaven, everything is perfect, and so on and so forth. And so it's our civil responsibility to participate in the affairs of whatever country you are in, and so they should, if they think, oh, the United States is so good, so perfect, that's not true. This country, from the very beginning, is aiming to make it a more perfect union, meaning that the union is not perfect at any time, and you are working hard to make it more perfect. So if you're scared, you have a good reason to be scared, and you're not citizen. So it's somewhat, what you can contribute is somewhat more restricted than the citizen. But you can still talk to your friends, talk to people you know, and spread the word. And that is very important.
Here's a question about a specific research memo that President Donald Trump issued shortly before leaving office called NSPM 33. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't know exactly what it is about.
Okay, we'll put that on the list of things to follow up on. So a student who's concerned about whether it's safe to call or text parents in China?
I think it's a good assumption for everybody to assume is that whatever you're doing is open for people to see. So, don't say bad things behind people's back. They will know. And don't do bad things because it will be discovered. And, whether it's safe, don't do bad things, first of all. But if you're doing things that could be misunderstood, it's tough. There's a good reason to be concerned.
I guess it goes with the generic advice of when you're writing an anonymous peer review, imagine that they'll figure out who you are eventually. A question about what legal help do you think the universities should provide to foreign researchers who have these concerns?
I think people should understand that university's interest does not always align with individuals. And so you should just be take care of yourself. And of course, there are all these policies that if you are teaching and you did something, the university should represent you. And but in this kind of criminal charges, I think most of the university would try to defend itself. Of course, there's one thing that is always true, that people who are charged by the government are under very difficult situations because nobody knows all the facts, right? We don't know what happened in terms of Gang Chen. We don't know what exactly happened to Charles Lieber. And we just don't know. You have the word from the government. And of course, I use the example of Franklin Tao. At least we can know what he said. So if you really want to know, go to pacer.gov and you can see all the court documents. But people will say, well, the government charged this guy of certain things. He must have done something bad. So that's very, very difficult situation. And of course, if you are a university official, it's the same thing for them too. They don't know whether you have done something bad. So it is a difficult situation. But of course, we would always say, regardless of whether a person has done some bad things, we need to make sure that the justice is done right. So a person should be punished for what bad things this person has done in proportional to the crime he has done. So at least that part, we should all, hold that belief that whether this person has done anything wrong, we want to make sure that the justice is done.
You've been talking for a while, and I appreciate your energy. I also know that you kindly volunteered to have a session for students after this, so I don't want to shortchange the students. But I think I'll take 2 more questions, and then we'll close down this meeting. And I hope that most of the students here have been on email lists where they have the link for the Zoom meeting. That's going to be a student safe space with Professor Shi afterwards. So there's a couple of questions here about who is key in supporting you? Are there particular civil liberties groups or civil rights groups or contacts of individuals that people could get in touch with to volunteer to help out with this cause?
Yes, there are. There are. I can provide some information to you afterwards. And also on my slides, I think I mentioned that some Asian American civil liberty organization filed an amicus brief on behalf of Franklin Tao. And the name of that organization is there. And I think if you Google that name, you should be able to find the names of these organizations. And but I will provide some information to you afterwards.
And one last question that I find very interesting. I think many of us who read the FBI and the DOJ report on Professor Gang Chen may have been appalled by what seemed like just an ignorance of how academic science works. And wondering if there has been any effort on the part of the DOJ or the FBI or the powers that be to actually educate themselves by talking to leaders in academia and understand how academic research works.
My impression, right, as far as I know, the communication is mostly one way. That is, the FBI try to educate the universities. And I don't think I have seen much that the university is trying to educate the law enforcement. So the answer is no, I don't. I have not seen things like that.
Okay, I want to be respectful of our students because I think that they deserve a safe space to ask questions. So I want to thank you again so much for your energy and your generosity and your bravery in coming to give this talk to so many people about such an important issue. So maybe we can give a virtual round of applause and the reactions, and then I'm going to end this meeting. The recording will be posted. We will post the chat in some form. We'll try to anonymize it so that people feel safe, and hope that the students can go on to the student Zoom link to talk to Professor Xi directly. Thank you again so much.
I want to thank you for the opportunity.
It was really our honor to have you here.
Thank you.